Around 3 billion years ago, life existed as tiny, floating atoms in what you could imagine as the world's first petri dish. Fast forward 6 million years, and we witnessed the first hominids appearing, the primate family that eventually led to humans. About 1.9 million years ago, Homo erectus became the first species to leave Africa, spreading across new lands with brains larger than their primate ancestors. Around 400,000 years ago, Neanderthals appeared, adapted to the cold regions of Europe and Western Asia, their faces among the most human-like ever seen. Then came us, Homo sapiens, the only surviving members of our genus. But how did humans rise to global dominance through civilization? Our journey begins in Mesopotamia, around 4000 BC, in the fertile lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, in the Sumerian city of Uruk. Unlike our hunter-gatherer ancestors, the people of Uruk learned to harvest cereal grains like wheat and barley. Turning these grains into food was no easy task. They used an early invention called the hand mill. 2 stones crushed the grains, producing flour that could be stored for later. This was the birth of agriculture, a monumental shift. Humans no longer relied solely on hunting or gathering. They created a steady food supply. This innovation allowed Uruk to flourish, supporting over 50,000 residents. However, this new lifestyle affected human bodies. Men's average height dropped from 5'9" to around 5'3", while women shrank from 5'3" to 5 feet. Once elite hunters and gatherers, humans became smaller, less physically imposing farmers. Life became more sedentary, tied to land and crops, fundamentally changing the human experience. By early 3000 BC, legend speaks of King Gilgamesh ruling as a Sumerian monarch. But by the century's end, the Akkadians rose to power, with Sargon the Great uniting all of Sumeria under his rule. Meanwhile, in the Indus Valley, a highly advanced civilization was emerging. Between 3300 and 1300 BC, the Indus people developed sophisticated toilets, complete with seats, chutes, and covered drainage systems, carrying waste away from homes and keeping their cities clean, a marvel of early public hygiene. In contrast, ancient Egypt focused on the afterlife. Pharaohs believed that preserving their bodies through mummification ensured their spirits could continue ruling beyond death. Their pyramids, filled with treasures and offerings, serve as eternal homes for their spirits. Pharaoh Djoser, from 2667 to 2648 BCE, built the Step Pyramid at Saqqara, followed by Sneferu, 2613 to 2589 BCE, with the bent and red pyramids. Khufu, 2589 to 2566 BCE, constructed the Great Pyramid of Giza, an awe-inspiring 20-year labor, later followed by Khafre and Menkaure with the second and third pyramids. Meanwhile, in China around 2100 BCE, the first dynasty was emerging along the Yellow River. Chinese farmers relied heavily on rice, wheat, and barley, but devastating floods frequently destroyed crops. Yu the Great emerged as a legendary figure, spending 13 years redirecting the river with dikes and levees, protecting the land and its people. This marked the beginning of the Xia dynasty, establishing a powerful precedent. Leadership should be earned through merit, a principle that influenced Chinese civilization for centuries. Back in Mesopotamia around 1772 BC, in ancient Babylon, King Hammurabi laid the foundation for one of the earliest legal systems. He commissioned a massive stone stele, standing 7 feet tall and 2 feet wide, engraved with 282 laws for his citizens to follow. These laws were strict. For example, if a man accused another of murder but could not prove it, the accuser would face execution. If someone damaged another's eye, they would lose their own eye. If a bone was broken, it would be reciprocated. Even slaves were accounted for. Injuries to a slave required compensation worth half their value. Hammurabi's code didn't just enforce rules. It structured society itself. People were assigned a value depending on their social class. Nobles outranked commoners, and commoners outranked slaves. Equality was not part of ancient Babylon. This concept of social hierarchy influenced societies for centuries to come. Meanwhile, in modern-day Turkey, a lesser-known power emerged, the Hittite Empire. Labarnas, ruling from 1680 to 1650 BCE, unified the Hittite city-states under one banner. A capable leader and shrewd diplomat, Labarnas led armies, forged alliances, and earned the trust of his people. Through his leadership, the Hittites expanded their territory, eventually bordering Egypt, and prospered under his just rule. Across the Aegean, the Mycenaean civilization flourished in Greece from 1600 to 1100 BCE. It was an elite warrior-centered society organized around palace-states, each operating independently. Kings ruled their territories, while cities like Troy, Mycenae, and Pylos grew as centers of power. Linear B, the first recorded form of Greek writing, began to appear, leaving us the earliest records of the Indo-European Greek language. Back in Egypt, a different kind of hierarchy dominated society. The Egyptian social pyramid mirrored the Great Pyramid of Giza, broad at the base, narrowing at the top. Peasants and slaves formed the foundation, responsible for farming and building monumental projects like pyramids. Artisans, stonemasons, sculptors, and craftsmen produced luxurious works admired by Egypt to this day. Merchants traded goods along the Nile, scribes maintained records, and soldiers protected the empire. Higher still were bureaucrats, viziers, and priests overseeing administration and religion. At the peak of it all was the pharaoh, the living link between the gods and the people. Every layer of society existed to support the ruler. Pharaoh Ramesses II, reigning from 1279 to 1213 BCE, leveraged the system to expand Egypt, oversee massive constructions such as the temples of Abu Simbel, the Ramesseum, and Karnak, and restore lands previously lost. Yet Egypt had rivals. The Hittite king Mutwalli II, ruling from 1295 to 1272 BCE, sought to conquer Egyptian territories, continuing the expansionist vision of Labarnas. Ramesses II met this challenge at Kadesh, leading 20,000 men in a decisive battle. Though he attempted clever strategies, the Hittites, prepared with 40,000 soldiers, resisted. The battle ended in a stalemate, and eventually both sides recognized the value of peace. When Mutwalli's successor, Hattusili III, ascended the Hittite throne, he and Ramesses signed the first recorded peace treaty in 1258 BC. The agreement declared that neither kingdom would attack the other, ensuring stability. Peace allowed the Hittites and Egyptians to share knowledge, metalworking techniques, and advanced weaponry flow to Egypt, while agricultural expertise reached the Hittites. Both civilizations prospered, demonstrating how diplomacy and cooperation could surpass conflict. The peace held until around 1200 BCE, when the Hittite Empire fell, succumbing to repeated invasions by the mysterious Sea Peoples, leaving a memory etched in history. After the harvest season, peasants were often tasked with Egypt's massive construction projects, including the building of pyramids. Just above the slaves in the social hierarchy were the artisans, stonemasons, sculptors, and craftsmen who created the stunning works of art that still define ancient Egypt today. Next were the merchants, navigating the Nile to trade gold, papyrus, and linen, earning respect and steady profits. Above them were the scribes, masters of writing who trained extensively in hieroglyphics. They maintained records of grain stores, taxes, and even documented the daily life of the pharaoh. Soldiers followed, dedicated to protecting the empire, and often well-fed and equipped for battle. Near the top were bureaucrats and officials, viziers managing logistics, priests overseeing temples, and nobles supervising regions to maintain order. At the very peak of Egyptian society sat the pharaoh, the living link between the gods and the people. The entire social structure existed to serve the pharaoh. Farmers paid taxes, artisans produced works for the royal court, merchants supplied goods, scribes recorded events, soldiers defended the land, and bureaucrats executed the ruler's commands. Pharaoh Ramesses II, ruling from 1279 to 1213 BCE, used this system to achieve extraordinary feats. He commissioned grand structures like the temples of Abu Simbel, the Ramesseum, and Karnak, expanded Egypt's territory, and reclaimed lands lost to previous pharaohs, except those controlled by the Hittites. Mutwalli II, the Hittite king from 1295 to 1272 BCE, attempted to assert dominance over Egyptian lands. Ramesses, determined to protect his empire, marched on Kadesh with 20,000 men in 4 divisions. But the Hittites, forewarned through espionage, fortified their city with 40,000 soldiers. Ramesses split his forces to try to draw out Mutwali, but the Hittites did not engage. His divided army was exposed, yet for reasons lost to history, the Hittites never pressed the advantage. The battle ended in a stalemate. Eventually, both sides sought lasting peace. When Mutwali died, Hattusili III became king of the Hittites, and in 1258 BCE, he and Ramesses signed the first known peace treaty, declaring neither nation would attack the other. Peace allowed the Hittites to share advanced metalworking techniques with Egypt, while Egypt shared agricultural knowledge with the Hittites. Both civilizations thrived, showing how diplomacy and cooperation could foster prosperity. The treaty lasted until around 1200 BCE, when the Hittite Empire collapsed under repeated attacks from the mysterious sea peoples, vanishing from history. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the first major civilization in the Americas was emerging in modern-day Mexico. The Olmec civilization, lasting from 1200 BCE to 400 BCE, is often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica. Much about them remains a mystery due to undeciphered hieroglyphs. Yet their legacy survives in colossal stone heads, 17 of them, carved with care. In Olmec belief, the head alone could embody a person's spirit, experience, and emotions. Though we may never know the names of their leaders, like Ramesses or Hammurabi, these stone faces allow them to remain immortal in history. In the East, the Zhou dynasty in China, 1046 to 256 BCE, rose after the Shang dynasty's decline. The Zhou introduced the concept of the mandate of heaven, shaping Chinese governance for centuries. This system had 4 key principles. The emperor's right to rule was granted by heaven. Only one emperor could reign at a time. An emperor's virtue determined his legitimacy, and no dynasty held eternal power. Signs such as droughts, floods, or famine indicated the ruler had lost heaven's favor, justifying the rise of a new dynasty. The Zhou also developed a feudal system, creating a clear social pyramid. Peasants worked the land to provide food. Soldiers protected the territory. Lords owned land and taxed peasants, sending a portion of the harvest to the king. The king at the top collected wealth and controlled the empire. The majority labored to sustain the elite, driven by necessity and philosophy. Feeding an empire required many hands, but philosophical ideas also reinforced social order. Toward the end of the Zhou era, Eastern philosophy began to flourish, with thinkers like Confucius shaping moral and political thought for generations. This period also saw the rise of philosophical systems that would shape Chinese society for centuries. Confucianism, founded by Confucius, emphasized respect, loyalty, and responsibility in every relationship. At its heart is the concept of Li, which refers to rituals, customs, and proper manners. Observing Li helped maintain harmony and order across families and communities. Around the same time, Lao Tzu introduced Taoism. The word Tao means the way or the path, and Taoism teaches that people should live in harmony with the natural flow of the universe instead of struggling against it. Focus on living simply. Tend to your farming, and do not worry about what is beyond your control. Taoism also introduced the idea of yin and yang, complementary forces like light and dark, hot and cold, masculine and feminine, that must be balanced to achieve harmony and fulfillment. Together, Confucianism and Taoism offered guidance and stability to the lives of ordinary Chinese farmers. Meanwhile, in Greece, city-states continued to grow. By 800 BCE, the Greek city-states realized their land was often infertile, requiring imported grain to feed their populations. This need spurred colonization. Miletus alone established over 90 colonies across Europe, extending from modern Marseille in France to Rostov-on-Don in Russia. One of the emerging city-states that would leave a lasting mark was Rome. According to legend, twin brothers Romulus and Remus were abandoned along the Tiber River and saved by a she-wolf. When they reached adulthood, they sought to build a city at the wolf's rescue site. Disagreements over its name led to a fight, and Romulus ultimately killed Remus, founding Rome in 753 BCE. While the Greeks expanded, Cyrus the Great was rising in Persia. Born under the rule of the Median king Astyages, Cyrus survived a royal plot to kill him as a baby, secretly raised by a shepherd. As an adult, he led a revolt against his grandfather, fulfilling prophecy, and conquered the Median Empire in 550 BCE. He continued his campaigns, capturing Babylon and the Indus Valley, consolidating an enormous empire. Cyrus even took control of the Greek city-states in Ionia, laying the foundations for the mighty Persian Empire, before passing power to his successor, Darius the Great. Back in Greece, city-states like Sparta and Athens developed contrasting societies. Sparta was a military powerhouse, dedicated entirely to war and physical strength. Unfit infants were abandoned, and boys underwent rigorous training from a young age, enduring harsh conditions to become lifelong soldiers. Spartan society had three main classes: the aristocratic rulers, free non-citizens who served in the military, and helots, enslaved people who worked the land. Life in Sparta was disciplined, brutal, and focused on conquest. Athens, by contrast, experimented with democracy. Its government included the Council of 500 and the Assembly. Citizens, male, free, and of Athenian descent, participated in governance through a lottery system called sortition. Each tribe provided 50 members to serve on the council, selected via a device called a clariterion, which randomly determined service. The assembly allowed citizens to vote on laws, appointments, and policy, with the council setting the agenda. To manage the chaos of thousands voting, 9 presidents oversaw proceedings, ensuring fairness and preventing bribery. Not everyone supported this system. Plato criticized Athenian democracy as chaotic and inefficient. In a republic, he argued that only those trained in wisdom and virtue could properly lead. Plato envisioned a philosopher king, a ruler who studies logic, justice, and governance, capable of guiding society wisely. He famously wrote, "The society we have described can never see the light of day until philosophers become rulers, or rulers become true philosophers." Yet history shows a problem. Every leader often believed themselves to be a philosopher king. From Yu the Great in China to Labarnas of the Hittites, even Siddhartha Gautama in Magadha, rulers have long claimed moral or intellectual authority, whether in practice or in legend. Siddhartha Gautama, born into luxury around 500 BCE, lived a life of opulence inside a grand palace. Surrounded by wealth, jewels, and every comfort imaginable, he experienced a world seemingly perfect with no want or need. Yet, everything changed the moment he stepped outside the palace walls. There, he witnessed the harsh realities of life, an old man dying in the street, reminding him that human existence is filled with suffering and mortality. Like Gilgamesh before him, Siddhartha realized that death is an inescapable part of life. Determined to find understanding, Siddhartha renounced his luxurious life and embarked on a quest for enlightenment. He studied under spiritual teachers, practiced meditation, and sought answers to the fundamental questions of human existence. After 6 years of rigorous pursuit, he meditated beneath a fig tree until he attained enlightenment, a profound state of inner peace where one transcends the ego and connects with universal consciousness. From that moment, he became known as the Buddha, the Awakened One, dedicated his life to teaching others the path to understanding and compassion. Meanwhile, in Persia, Darius I and his successors pursued the expansion of their empire. In 490 BCE, Darius led 20,000 Persian soldiers to the city of Marathon, just 26.2 miles from Athens. The Athenians, vastly outnumbered with only 10,000 men, met the invaders in a decisive battle. Greek hoplites crushed the Persian wings before turning on the center, forcing the remnants to retreat to their ships. Historical accounts estimate 6,400 Persian casualties versus just 192 Athenian losses. Athenian messenger Phidippides then ran the distance to Athens to announce a victory, giving birth to the tradition of the marathon. Darius's death left the Persian throne to his son, Xerxes I, who vowed revenge. In 480 BCE, Xerxes led over 100,000 troops against Greece. At Thermopylae, Spartan King Leonidas and 7,000 warriors made a heroic stand. Despite their bravery and a daring attack on the Persian camp, the Spartans were ultimately overwhelmed. The Greeks would later turn the tide at Salamis, where Athenian general Themistocles lured the Persian fleet into narrow straits and secured a crucial naval victory. With Persian general Mardonius leading the remaining forces, Greek city-states united at Plataea, raising a 110,000-strong army. Despite facing an even larger Persian force, the Greeks used their reign and strategy to achieve a decisive victory, ending the Greco-Persian Wars and ensuring the survival of their culture. This triumph ushered in Athens' golden age. Freed from constant threat, the city created architectural marvels like the Parthenon atop the Acropolis, symbolizing wealth and culture. Theater flourished through festivals such as the city Dionysia, honoring the god Dionysus, and playwrights like Sophocles' Aeschylus and Aristophanes rose to prominence. Yet, tensions between Athens and Sparta eventually led to conflict. In 434 BCE, disputes over the city of Corcyra sparked war, including naval battles at Sabota and Pylos. A fragile peace was established by 421 BCE, but soon collapsed as Athens launched an expedition to Sicily. Initially successful, the campaign faltered when General Alcibiades was recalled, leaving Athens leaderless. Syracuse, reinforced by Sparta, resisted fiercely, leading to the destruction of the Athenian fleet, thousands of deaths, and the capture of many. A decade later, Sparta defeated Athens, marking the end of classical Greece's legendary era. In the east, the Zhou dynasty's long rule concluded after 800 years, ushering in the Warring States period, 474 to 221 BCE. During this time, Han Feizi introduced legalism, a philosophy asserting that humans are inherently selfish and require strict laws and punishments to maintain social order. Legalism emphasized a centralized, powerful ruler with absolute control over the military, economy, and society to ensure stability. Meanwhile, in Mesoamerica, the Zapotec civilization flourished in the Oaxaca Valley. Monte Alban, their mountaintop capital, overlooked the valley and housed a hierarchical society of elites, artisans, and farmers. The Zapotecs innovated in agriculture, cultivating maize and other crops to sustain the population during environmental challenges. They developed an early writing system using symbols and glyphs and created sophisticated calendars based on 260-day and 365-day cycles. In Greece, 356 BCE marked the birth of Alexander the Great in Pella, Macedonia. Son of King Philip II and Queen Olympia, Alexander was destined for greatness. His education under Aristotle, the father of logic and a pioneer in the scientific method, gave him a foundation in philosophy, biology, and systematic thinking, a legacy still taught in schools today. Aristotle, the brilliant philosopher and teacher of Alexander the Great, shaped his pupils' understanding of philosophy, ethics, and art, foundations that would later influence the entire Western world. By the time Alexander was 20, his father, King Philip II of Macedon, had been assassinated, and thanks to his education, Alexander was ready to take command. In 336 BCE, Alexander ascended the throne and immediately faced rebellion. The city of Thebes resisted his rule, so Alexander and his army marched 240 miles in just 14 days. When Thebes refused to surrender, Alexander razed the city, killing 6,000 and enslaving the rest. The rest of the Greek city-states recoiled in fear, allowing Alexander to consolidate power and focus on his next target, Persia and King Darius III. In 333 BCE, at the Battle of Issus, Alexander decisively defeated Darius III, forcing him to flee. Over the next few years, Alexander captured strategic cities, including the heavily fortified port of Tyre. By 331 BCE, he faced Darius again at Gaugamela near the Tigris River in modern Iraq. Outnumbered, Alexander's superior tactics shattered the Persian army, and Darius fled once more. Alexander then took Babylon and continued eastward, conquering regions of modern Iran and Afghanistan. In 330 BCE, he seized the Persian capital of Persepolis, rich in culture and wealth. Alexander pressed further into India, crossing the Hindu Kush Mountains, but his troops, exhausted from years of campaigning, refused to continue. Though Alexander's eastward expansion stopped, a new power arose in India, the Mauryan Empire. Under Ashoka the Great, who ascended in 261 BCE, the empire expanded aggressively, including a brutal conquest of Kalinga. The bloodshed haunted Ashoka, leading him to embrace Buddhism and promote nonviolence, religious tolerance, and ethical governance through edicts carved on rocks and pillars. In contrast, the West celebrated heroic feats in battle. Alexander died in Babylon at age 32, having spread Greek ideas across his empire, planting the seeds of Western culture. After his death in 323 BCE, his generals divided his empire into three main territories: the Ptolemies in Egypt, the Seleucids in the east, and the Antigonids in Greece. Ptolemy ushered in prosperity, building the Library of Alexandria, a center of knowledge attracting scholars from across the world. The Seleucids controlled Babylon and promoted Greek culture over a melting pot of local traditions, reaching their peak under King Antiochus III, 223 to 187 BC, with an empire stretching from modern Turkey to Pakistan. Meanwhile, the Antigonids struggled to maintain Greek influence, marking the decline of classical Greece. Rome's rise in the west faced one last challenge: Carthage. The two powers clashed over Sicily's city of Messina. After 20 years, Rome defeated Carthage in the First Punic War, 241 BCE. The peace was brief. By 218 BCE, Hannibal led Carthage in the Second Punic War, famously crossing the Alps with war elephants. Hannibal won early victories, including the devastating Battle of Cannae, 216 BCE, but Roman general Scipio Africanus ultimately defeated him at Zama, 202 BCE, ending Carthage's dominance and cementing Rome's control over the western Mediterranean. By 86 BCE, Greece had been weakened and destabilized, leaving the Mediterranean ripe for Rome to rise as the dominant power. General Lucius Cornelius Sulla led Roman legions to Athens, besieging the city for months. When Athens fell, Sulla ordered his soldiers to loot and pillage, destroying cultural treasures and cementing Rome's status as a superpower. Rome's expansion didn't stop there. In 63 BCE, General Pompey was sent to capture Jerusalem and Galilee, bringing them under Roman rule, including the small village of Nazareth. Meanwhile, in 58 BCE, Julius Caesar became governor of Cisalpine Gaul, tasked with conquering the rest of the Gauls. Celtic tribes of modern France, Belgium, and parts of Switzerland, Germany, and Italy. The Gauls, led by Vercingetorix, united to resist Rome. At the Battle of Alesia in 52 BCE, Caesar surrounded the city with a double line of fortifications, trapping Vercingetorix's forces inside and intercepting reinforcements outside. After weeks of grueling siege, the Gauls were forced to surrender, and Vercingetorix personally offered himself to Caesar, ending Gallic resistance. Over the next 2 years, Caesar integrated the Gauls into Rome, granting them citizenship. Yet Caesar's growing power alarmed the Senate. They demanded he disband his army, threatening to declare him an enemy of the state. In response, Caesar made a fateful decision. He crossed the Rubicon River, a line that marked the point of no return, plunging Rome into civil war. Caesar's campaigns against Pompey, including battles in Corfinium and Pharsalus, proved his military genius. By the time he returned to Rome, he was hailed as dictator for life. Caesar enacted sweeping reforms, building roads, bridges, and aqueducts, granting citizenship to many, spreading Roman culture and language, and creating the Julian calendar, which is the foundation of the calendar we use today. However, Caesar's reign was short-lived. In 44 BCE, he was assassinated by senators Brutus and Cassius, plunging Rome into chaos. Young Octavian, Caesar's heir, allied with Mark Antony to defeat the assassins at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BCE. Tensions soon emerged between Octavian and Antony, culminating in the naval battle of Actium in 31 BCE. Octavian emerged victorious, while Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt and ultimately took their own lives. With no rivals remaining, Octavian became Rome's undisputed ruler. In 27 BCE, he was granted the title Augustus and became the first Roman emperor, marking the start of the Roman Empire. During his reign, a man who would change the world was born in Bethlehem, a Roman-occupied city in Judea, Jesus Christ. According to the Gospel of Luke, a decree from Caesar Augustus required a census of the entire Roman world. Mary and Joseph, expecting Jesus, traveled 90 miles from Nazareth to Bethlehem to register. Finding no room in the inn, they took shelter in a stable, where Mary gave birth to Jesus, later called the King of the Jews. As Jesus grew, stories of his life spread. His followers claimed he performed miracles, catching impossible numbers of fish, healing the blind, and spreading wisdom and compassion. These disciples began recording his teachings, laying the foundation for what would become Christianity, a faith that would grow to shape much of the world in the centuries to come. The life of Jesus Christ, chronicled by his closest disciples, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, changed the world forever. Each gospel tells much of the same story. A child born in a humble stable would grow to challenge the hearts and minds of people everywhere. While many loved Jesus, some saw him as a threat. When Emperor Tiberius ruled Rome from 14 to 37 AD, his reign was marked by paranoia and delators. A network of informants rewarded for spying and reporting on suspected traitors. In Judea, Pontius Pilate enforced these laws ruthlessly. As Jesus' influence grew, he became a political threat. Following the emperor's orders, Pilate had no choice but to execute Jesus by crucifixion. It was in this moment that Christianity was born, a small sect of Judaism that would eventually spread across the known world. Paul of Tarsus became Christianity's great missionary, spreading Jesus' teachings from Greece to Syria and beyond. His journeys are recorded in the book of Acts. Christianity's growth, however, sparked tension with Roman polytheism. When the Great Fire of Rome destroyed two-thirds of the city in 64 AD, Emperor Nero blamed the Christians, further fueling persecution. Meanwhile, heavy taxes and inflation due to reparations for fire caused unrest across the empire. In 66 AD, the first Jewish revolt erupted in Jerusalem. Jewish rebels initially expelled the Roman forces, gaining momentum in Galilee, but Rome responded with overwhelming force. General Vespasian, later emperor, pushed the rebels into Jerusalem. By 70 AD, during Passover, the city was besieged and internal conflict among the Jewish defenders weakened them further. The Romans breached the walls, killed countless civilians, and destroyed holy sites. Judaism survived, but Rome had made clear the consequences of defiance. Under Emperor Trajan, 98 to 117 AD, the Roman Empire reached its greatest territorial extent, from Britain to the Persian Gulf. Roman rule stretched across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Meanwhile, civilizations in the Americas thrived independently. In Peru and Chile, the Moche civilization constructed monumental pyramids like Huaca del Sol and Huaca de la Luna, creating advanced irrigation and fertilization systems using bird droppings to enrich the soil. Southward, the Nazca people etched giant geoglyphs, the mysterious Nazca lines, into the desert floor, their purpose still debated today. The Zapotecs built Monte Alban with careful urban planning, creating a city divided into districts for administration, religion, and residences lasting over 1,000 years. Back in Rome, after Trajan, Emperor Hadrian, 117 to 138 AD, focused on holding the vast empire together. In Britain, he built Hadrian's Wall to prevent rebellion, but in Judea, unrest continued. Simon Bar Kokhba led a revolt against Roman rule in 132 AD, aiming to restore Jewish independence, and seen by many as a messiah. His forces captured large portions of Aelia Capitolina. Rome's rebuilt Jerusalem. Hadrian responded with overwhelming force, sending 120,000 troops. Historian Cassius Dio wrote, 50 of their most important outposts and 985 of their most famous villages were razed. 580,000 men were slain. Nearly the whole Judea was made desolate. Rome had made its power brutally clear. While the Roman Empire expanded through force, China was finding unity and strength through philosophy. Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism spread alongside the Han Dynasty, combining ethical, spiritual, and social principles to create a stable and enduring civilization. Meanwhile, in the Americas, the Mayans were constructing temples across northern Petan, with short, broad pyramids, wide staircases, and enormous stucco masks representing the gods. These masks, made of plaster, burned lime, and powdered limestone, embodied deity souls and connected the people to the divine. Temples like the E7 sub-pyramid, with its 16 stucco faces, allowed worshippers to engage deeply with the spiritual world. And in the Middle East, a new empire was quietly taking shape. A man named Ardashir claimed his crowning achievement, a model of the solar system where the Earth rotated on its axis, centuries ahead of its time. Under the Gupta Empire, India became a hub of intellectual and scientific innovation, with scholars advancing medicine, astronomy, and mathematics, laying foundations that would influence the world for centuries to come. Meanwhile, in the West, Europe had entered what would later be called the Dark Ages. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD, power fragmented across the continent. Odoacer, the Germanic general who deposed Romulus Augustus, became king of Italy, only to be overthrown by Theodoric the Great of the Ostrogoths in 493 AD, creating the Ostrogothic kingdom with the backing of the Eastern Roman Empire. With the old Roman administrative structure gone, Europe became a patchwork of kingdoms, often at war with one another, while trade and urban life declined. In contrast, the Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantine Empire, continued to thrive. Constantinople remained a fortified jewel of the Mediterranean, its wealth and culture preserved even as the Western territories fell into chaos. The empire maintained Roman law, Greek culture, and Christianity, acting as a buffer between Europe and the rising powers of Persia, the Huns, and other nomadic groups. The Huns, led by Attila, the scourge of God, remained a terrifying force. From 441 to 452 AD, Attila's campaign swept through the Balkans, Gaul, and Italy. Although he was defeated at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains in 451 AD, his invasions instilled fear across Europe. Legendary accounts claim that Pope Leo I confronted Attila in 452 AD outside Rome, and whether through divine intervention, legend, or strategy, Attila withdrew, sparing the city but leaving devastation in his wake. Meanwhile, in India, the Gupta Empire reached its height under rulers who championed learning, art, and scientific advancement. Brahmagupta's work on zero and arithmetic, combined with Aryabhata's astronomical calculations, marked India as a global center of knowledge. The empire's scholars advanced medicine, developed surgical techniques, and recorded detailed observations of the natural world. This period is often considered India's golden age, a beacon of intellectual achievement, while Europe struggled to rebuild from centuries of upheaval. Across the oceans, the Americas were seeing remarkable growth in civilizations that were entirely independent of the Old World. The Maya were constructing cities like Tikal and Palenque, complete with towering pyramids, astronomical observatories, and intricate hieroglyphic writing. Their knowledge of celestial movements guided agriculture, ritual, and governance, showing that civilizations flourished even without contact with Rome, China, or India.